So as I was mentioning to someone earlier today, one doesn't reach this size and shape very easily, okay? I was raised lacto-vegetarian until I was about 20. And then I came to the United States, and much to my father's chagrin, when people would ask me what I ate, he said, anything that doesn't outrun her or doesn't eat her up. So, but as soon as I came into the US, one of the things that I recognized was this firm belief, especially in the wild, wild West where I was getting my PhD, that if you didn't eat meat, you would be anemic. You would have vitamin B12 deficiency. You would have calcium deficiency. You'd have a number of deficiencies. And I did not look like I was deficient in anything, which made me then wonder, and I actually worked on my master's degree program to establish that you can, on a vegetarian diet, like they have done in India, where 80-some% of the community cannot afford meat on a regular basis, actually eat a plant-based diet to get everything that you need without become deficient. Having said that, let's look at this plant-based craze that's taken over this world, okay? I always start with this slide, and that is how do we learn about food? And this one particularly applies to the United States because we no longer teach food science and how to prepare even a cup of tea in middle school and high school. And as a result, students today and the community at large pick up what they do about nutrition from these type of sources. So you've got the Wall Street Journal or financial magazines, Inc., Entrepreneur, USA Today, etc. And then you've got these folks, Dr. Oz, you've probably heard of him, and Dr. Sanjay Gupta, perhaps trained physicians and good if they stayed in their lane, but with not a lick of food science or nutrition or physiology, but they are the ones who are actually teaching our folks what is good for them and probably helping create this plant-based craze. I also present this to my students and I talk about the hamburger. So 3 hamburgers. Here's McDonald's, the one that sold many billions of whatever. Here is a cell culture hamburger worth, I think it cost $38,000 or something for a bite. And then you've got this plant-based burger, which even bleeds like a burger, just regularly bleeds. And they worked a lot on this just to make it like meat. But if any of you have actually eaten meat and know the taste of meat like I do, that does not taste like meat. Which then makes me wonder, and then we've also got this into the fish area. So we've got fish-free seafood, and we've got a number of products. This one is something that's won a lot of awards in the US. It's a sushi that looks like tuna, acts like tuna, to people who've never eaten tuna, made from tomatoes. So it's a great, great story, right? Which then begs the question, why? And I take my job very seriously. I'm a food product developer. So I'm going to show you something that I actually have. And that is, I have an app and I have a sensor on my arm. It's right here. I have a sensor embedded. So I try anything and everything that's plant-based. So I have a sensor. And if I do this, it tells me my blood sugar. And do you know that if I eat a piece of meat or a hot dog, my blood sugar does not change much. But when I eat these plant-based stuff, my blood sugar goes up, doubles sometimes. You know why? Because if you talk to people who make plant-based, they'll tell you that proteins, no matter where they come from, cannot really replicate the taste, the texture, the functionality that you have in the meat-based products or the traditional favorites, unless you pump a lot of starch and sugar. So who is behind plant-based? The companies that tried to make it out of the protein industry, but realized that for every bucket of protein they produce, there's 6 buckets of starch and fiber, and thank goodness, nobody can make those plant-based without that. And that's important. Now let's talk about unintended consequences. I'm going to reach out for an example that actually happened with gluten-free. So the FDA called me 3 years ago and a group of us to ask us why we were having children, babies were being born with spina bifida, neural tube defects in certain pockets of the US. We did some research, and what we discovered, a condition that we thought we had eradicated, was actually back in, because these yoga mamas were eating gluten-free when they were not really when they're not really allergic to it. So they did not have celiac proof, but they had picked up upon themselves to take these products, and so they now had children because they lacked the folacin and the folic acid and the other nutrients that are in your plant, in your regular food. So the unintended consequence is what I'm going to talk about, and that is, Simon already talked about restrictive diets. They are not for children. They're not for people. Vegan is not for infants and kids. Please understand, every child has to rely on a human milk or other animal milk. And refined starches can affect your blood sugar, your triglycerides. And by the way, there's this other part of it, and that's the salt content. The last bit is, what are we really doing to this protein? We are manipulating it to such an extent, and we're manipulating it to such an extent in the extraction process that all the tests for protein may qualify, except for one test, and that's our immune system. Our immune system does one thing. It detects foreign proteins. So it's one thing to eat peas or beans or the proteins from those, but when it's highly manipulated to look like a plant-based product, I believe that you may be fooling your brain and everything else, but you are not exactly fooling your immune system. And I predict that there are going to be a lot of allergies down the road. P is for protein. It's also a potential risk. These are all the companies that are being the plant-based alternatives. But do we have proof of its efficacy? Have we looked at the process, both how it's made and how it goes through our system? Have we looked at its purity? Is it really pure? And for what purpose? And with that, I turn it over to the next.